Welcome and good evening, everyone, as I call to order the regular school board meeting of Independent School District number 882. It is Monday, December 1st. It is 6 p.m. in the evening. I'd like to note that we do not have board member Jeff Hegle or Mary Barthel here this evening, but we still do have a quorum. So we are good to continue this meeting. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now looking for approval of tonight's tentative agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Melissa Curtis, seconded by Casey Root. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. Motion passes 4-0. Had to count there for a second. We do not have any citizen comments this evening. It'll move us right along to item number 5, fiscal stability. Looking for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Melissa Curtis, seconded by Casey Root. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. Motion passes 4-0. On to item number 6, collaborative connections. I will pass it over to Superintendent Eric Olson.
As always, we get very excited about the huge participation and support that our community gives to our programming across our district. Cheryl Kammerer brought forward $1,000 for the Monty Python's robotics team. And Cargill stopped by the Rally to Read meeting last month and gave $5,000 for the Rally to Read programming, the early learning piece of this. As a reminder, there's the early learning piece, and then there's the book drive for the high school library. So Cargill, $5,000, and Cheryl Kammerer, $1,000 going to our these two fine programs.
Therefore, be it resolved by the Monticello School Board 882 to gratefully accept the following donations. Cheryl Kammerer, $1,000 for the Monty Python's robotics team. Cargill, $5,000 for Rally to Read Early Learning.
Second.
By Melissa Curtis, seconded by Casey Root. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion passes 4-0. Now we're on to item number B, the funnest part of this evening. Help me welcome to the podium Director of Business Services, Tina Burkholder, to go over truth and taxation.
More fans online just wanting to listen to our truth and taxation hearing tonight. All right. So with this agenda and throughout this TNT presentation, I'll go over the meeting requirements, talk about the current year school budget, talk about the proposed levy, and also allow for public comment. So with the requirements, we're required to have our truth and taxation hearing anywhere from November 25th through December 26th, and it should be at 6 p.m. or later. We need to talk about our current budget, like I already mentioned, go over the proposed levy, talk about significant changes, more of the big increases or changes from the previous year, and then I'll allow for public comment. So unlike cities and counties, our fiscal year goes July 1 to June 30th, where cities and counties, they go from January to December. So the levy that's approved in December, that gets collected in the following year, 2026, and that goes towards our budget in the 26-27 school year, so a year delayed. So we don't have that budget adopted or approved or even started. This is the first start in that process, so we're just going to talk about the budget that was approved in 25-26. And I already talked about this on this slide. So our school budget has different funds that are mandated by state statute where it's divvied out by the revenue sources and purposes. So we have a general fund, which includes our capital projects fund and our special ed cooperative fund. But when the state looks at our finances, they're all grouped together. Our food service fund is 02. Our community service fund, which also includes our hockey arena, in 04. debt service fund in '07, an internal service fund in '20, and an OPEB trust fund in '45. And so only the general fund, community service, and debt service funds are the ones that are actually seeing property tax levy revenue in those budgets. Another breakdown of our budget by the different categories, but I think a better picture on the next two slides where you can see the general fund is our main operating fund. So both on the revenue side and on the expense side, it is 83% of our budget. So a lot of the money coming in and going out is in our main operating fund. And just to dive in a little more on the general fund, now these two next charts do not include the capital projects fund or our special ed cooperative fund. It's just our main general fund. The revenue coming in, the largest source of 77% is state aid. So people probably think it's property tax that's funding our budget, but the largest source is state aid, where only 18% for this school year was local property tax revenue. On the expense side, we are very labor intense, where 80% of our budget is salary and benefits. So a lot of people expenses in our budget. So some property tax levy fundamentals. The state sets the formulas, and a lot of those formulas are either driven by enrollment, specific eligible expenses, population, voter-approved referendums, or valuations. And just because there's a change in our levy, it doesn't mean that we'll see that exact change in our revenue budget. Example, I think last year where operating capital, we saw an increase in operating capital in the levy form, but less in the state aid form, because when we see increases in our property values, the state tends to shift more on the levy side and do a reduction on the aid piece. So for the most part, our operating capital year over year is about $1 million, but how that comes in, either in the form of state aid or levy, will depend on our property values and what that's doing. This is to take a look at the property tax timeline from the school district's perspective. So in August, the Minnesota Department of Education opens up a levy system where we, as school employees, enter in information, our enrollments, the eligible expenses. Do we have a 10-year plan? Do we want to access long-term facility revenue? Just different questions of what the school district is doing and what we are accessing. On September 8th, the Minnesota Department has to send out its first levy report to school districts. For us, the school board approved the proposed tax levy on September 22nd. And then in November, schools can hold operating referendum question, and we did that in November 4th. Mid-November, people will see their proposed tax statements, and that does not include if a school district had a successful operating referendum. So that what was sent in November is based on what the county received in September from school districts, counties, and the cities as well. That generates that tax statement. December 1st is our TNT presentation, and December 15th will be when the board approves the levy, and then the following year is where we'll see that tax being collected and given to us. This has our general fund or levy components, and the biggest change since September is our successful passage of the operating referendum question. So it's increasing $3 million, and again, a lot of that has to do with that approved question. The next slide has the community service fund levy and the debt service fund levy, so not as big changes that you see here from September. It's basically the same of what you saw in September. And just to dive a little deeper on those changes that have happened in the different buckets that are at least 100,000 or more, either increases or decreases. Our voter-approved referendum increased $3.4 million compared to prior year. That is used for general operating expenses. It comes in the form of state aid and levy. And again, that increase is due to a successful question on November 4th. And it also has an inflation increase, and it will be dependent on student enrollment. And you'll kind of see that in some slides or a handout in the future. Equity went down $192,000. This has an aid and levy component. This went down when you have a higher increase in operating referendum, equity revenue will decrease. So that is one of the reasons why it decreased, and then also with lower student enrollment. Local optional revenue decreased $217,000. It's used for general operating expenses. This is also tied to enrollment, so that decreased because of that. Other post-employment benefits that increased $254,000. We had a higher OPEB liability expense, more retirees, higher health insurance premium, and more contracts that now have that sunset language where we're phasing out the retiree contributions. And the last big change that I'll talk about is our long-term facility revenue. That went down $109,000. Again, this has an aid and levy component, but it decreased mainly with student enrollment dropping. So with impact to taxpayers, there are different reasons why your tax bill could change. It could be dependent on the value of your individual property, what is happening with all the property valuations within the district, and then the changes with the formulas, whether it's based on enrollment or an operating referendum that was approved. And so the three key variables in that helps determine the property taxes due. The market value is determined by the assessor, and a lot of this will have experienced that this past fall of the assessor coming to our houses and doing a valuation. The property classification is determined by the state. If you're a residential business or whatnot, that is determined by the state. And then the levies set by the city, county, and school will, all three of those together will figure out what your property tax due. And then to take a look at the timeline based on a property taxpayer perspective. So in March of 2025, people received a valuation notice of what their property value is valued at. And like I mentioned, in this fall, a lot of Monticello residents had their properties assessed, so they'll see probably new valuations in this coming March of 2026. In the spring, early summer, the county will hold hearings if people want to challenge their valuation notice, and I have a slide to show us an example of that. Again, November, referendum questions could be posed, and we had that. Mid-November, like I mentioned, we have the proposed tax statements that are mailed to all property owners, the truth and taxation hearings, and then in March of 2026, that will have the final levy notice that will include a successful November question. So again, what was sent in November does not have that. What we will see in March will have that. This is a property tax notice example of what people received in November. So you see a county line, a city line, or a township line, and then a school district line. For the school districts, there's a voter-approved number and a non-voter-approved levy number that determines the school tax levy. In March, like I mentioned, people will receive a valuation notice. So at the bottom of that notice and on the back side will give you information on where and when you can go to challenge your valuation. And hopefully with our levy meetings and other previous TNT meetings, you understand that the district levy is set by formulas and the valuations within the school district. And based on your valuation will determine your piece of the district's levy pie. And so if you have a larger increase of home value or like the Excel power plant, they are a big chunk of our levy pie. And when more houses are being developed, that just cuts up the pie into more slices, but your property value determines how big your slice of the levy pie is. And to show that in a different way, we have two houses as an example. If they made up a school district where our district levy was $500 and they both had the exact same home values, they would each pay a levy of $250. if one property value, the gray, increased by 10% and the red one increased by 25%, that $500 got divvied up differently. So the gray house sees less than 250, where the red house sees more of that increase of their share based on their home value. This had our property value history over the last 8 years, and Monticello did see some increases in property values in 2022 and 23. So people probably felt that in their tax notices. Our financial advisors, Ehlers, also put together some hypothetical housing examples for us to see what a tax impact would be for different property values. I'm going to skip over this table. I like the graphs better. So with this chart or slide, we have a $150,000 residential home value and the $250,000 home value. The red bar is the proposed levy, and the black section there is that voter-approved referendum that was approved. So it is actually, on these slides, less than what we were telling people we thought the increase would be if the question would pass. Again, a lot of that has to do with that equity revenue offsetting the levy as well. The other two charts have a $350,000 home and a $450,000 home. Again, as examples that people probably could relate to. Another chart that I thought was interesting to include was, like I mentioned, there are two lines on the tax notice that for the school district that has voter-approved levy and non-voter-approved levy that are mainly determined by formulas, enrollment, and eligible expenses. So you can see where that red voter-approved levy is increasing because of that question. But for the most part, we're pretty consistent year over year on those two categories. And if people do see large increases in their property tax, they can work with their tax professional to see if they could get a refund or deferral on the increases. There's a homestead credit refund for all homestead property that's on a sliding scale, the special property refund that they could look to, or the senior citizen property tax deferral. This doesn't write off the taxes, but it will defer it until their house is sold. And here just has the levy summarized again, where the largest increase is in the general fund with the voter-approved question that was passed. And then also in your packet, there was a separate handout created by PTMA Financial Solutions. They did an awesome job of giving more information about property taxes and our levy. And there was a lot that I wanted to include, but I got overwhelmed by how much information was in there. But I wanted to highlight on that handout, page 4, which is interesting to me. It showed the levy, and it's probably hard to read for the audience, but it showed the levy in the different buckets based on how they're derived. So the levies that are based on pupil units minus the operating referendum, that increased the $3 million, and the equity reduced more because of that offset with the approved levy. But since our adjusted pupil units were going down 3.9%, a lot of those levies that are driven by enrollment were going down that same amount. And their summary doesn't match mine exactly because my adjustments, I include them with, like if there is an operating referendum adjustment, I include that with the operating referendum where they truly put all the adjustments down in that adjustment line, but I put them in the category that they are associated with. And then there was levies using expenditures as a basis. So our debt service, if there's bonds, our land leases, our OPEB, achievement and integration, career and technical, reemployment insurance. So all those that are based on expenditures are in that category. There's levies based on population. So I thought it was just neat to see the levy based on how it's derived. So you can see that clear relationship with enrollment on some of those levies. And on page 7, it had our total school tax levy trend since the pay of 2018. So you can see We haven't seen a lot of changes in our school tax levy, even with operating referendums in place that had that inflation factor. For the most part, we've seen on average a 2% on inflation. And so you can see, we haven't seen big swings in our tax levy. In '23, there was an inflation catch-up. I think everybody saw pressures with inflation, and that was in that year. But we also had a debt service reduction that kind of offset that. And then you see the bigger change in pay 26, where that operating referendum change is there. But again, a lot of information that I'll hopefully incorporate into future truth and taxation hearings, but baby steps. Any questions from the board?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Tina, for your great work in preparing this to make it as clear as possible, because I don't think it's extremely clear until you dive into it. Can you just explain the equity line item under the general fund one more time so we understand what that means?
So equity revenue has to deal with like land values. It's not equity as in inclusion equity. So it's based on 3 different, I think, levels. I don't have it truly memorized, but if a school district sees an increase in a voter-approved referendum, that will lower the equity revenue based on the laws in place.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
All right, I'll turn it over if there's public comment or questions.
This is the opportunity for the public to come up to the podium. You can come on up. You'll get 3 minutes. The timer will be on the board. And questions or comments specifically related to taxation or the levy.
I'm Lisa Latalo, 9200 92nd Street at Siegel. Is this levy just for 2026, or does it extend beyond that? Do we know?
26.
Okay, and then I'd like to understand how the school board arrived at deciding to double the existing levy. I know you're taking that levy away, but how did you arrive at doubling the existing levy?
I'll take a shot at answering your question. I'm Mark Branson, part of the budget committee. We worked with Tina Burkholder, the director of business services, numerous budget meetings, looking at the existing levy that was in place that was due to expire in about a year, that would have not covered all of the existing budget expenses that we had in place to maintain the district as is. So we were looking at millions of dollars of cuts over the next few years without that levy being in place. So we knew we needed more money, and the goal was to maintain. We didn't want to go to the voters and say, hey, we want to add, because we knew we were already short at the existing levy in place, which was $2 million and change. The one thing we decided to do, which was very uncommon in the state of Minnesota, was to decline the opportunity to automatically renew the existing levy that was in place, the 10-year levy that was in place. We could have, as a board, just voted to say, we want that to continue for 10 more years, and we're not going to ask any of you how you feel about that. But we didn't feel good about that because that's not transparent, and we think that voters should be allowed to vote on.
I have another question. I also want to know, where does this levy fall with the limit set by the Minnesota Commissioner for operating levies? Where does this Monticello School District fall in that range? Do you know? Per the Minnesota operating statute, levy statute?
We're just above the average.
But in relation to the limit that the Minnesota Commissioner set, where is this levy? If you don't know the answer, I'd appreciate you getting back to me. Yeah. Okay. And then, so the majority of the levy, it looks like it's going to the general operating. Is that school, is it classroom education, is it extracurricular? What is that? Is it sports? Is it, I'd like to understand more.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as you saw the pie charts that Tina shared in her presentation, you can see that some 2/3 plus of our budget goes to payroll and benefits. And so that's classroom related there. This voter approved operating levy is meant to maintain what we have in place. So it's not going to improve one area versus another. One of the options that we were looking at without the levy passing was that we were gonna have to increase the
I see my
extracurriculars.
time's up, but I'm just asking you to consider the additional burden it's placing on your taxpayers. We're funding this. Like, next year, my taxes are going up $563 for this levy. It's very unfortunate.
I wasn't gonna stop her, even though it kept going.
Oh, I
So
want-
you
okay,
can
then
keep
I-
asking questions if you
sorry.
want, but we do have just a general time limit, but there's not even enough people here to hit that, so.
And I'm going to ask one more question. How are you going to determine the benefit to your students with this increased levy? Like, I want to see the output of this. So how is Monticello going to measure the benefit that this levy provides to your students in education?
So just a couple things real quick. I'm gonna answer a couple questions if that's okay. Your first question was about why is it doubled? And so
And how did the board come to
yeah,
determining that doubling it was the right number?
right. So we didn't double what we currently had in place. So, but we revoked the current one, which brought us to 0. So it looks like the increase. So there was a sheet or a chart that Tina put up that showed the total increase from what our current operating levy was. So we can go back to that if we can, Gavin. That'll
Paper I
show-
got in the mail said it was going from 750 to 1,550 per pupil. Yeah.
Right, which is different than your tax.
I know, but how did you decide to, my question is, like, how did Monticello decide you need that much per student?
Right, so
What you
just
need
like
per student?
your
That's
cost of,
my,
yep, so like I'm sorry you maybe didn't get all of the information that was sent out to community members on this prior to the vote. But just like your cost of living increases have incurred, same with the school district. So the state hasn't kept up with funding since 2003. We had a really nice, robust presentation done by a third party that came in that's actually available for you online to watch, but hasn't kept up with cost of living increases for funding schools since 2003. And so all we were looking at doing wasn't to add additional benefits to our students with this increase. It was exactly how much we need as a school district to sustain what we're currently offering right now to our students. So, and like Mark had explained, about 80% of our budget is just salary and benefits. So it would drastically impact the quality of education our students would be receiving within the classroom.
maybe I moved to the wrong district.
That's how and if you look at where we're sitting funding-wise, and this is all available online as well, we were losing in terms of how we were ranked within the state. So you say that, but I encourage you to look at other communities surrounding us.
How
Much they pay personally, and then how much is actually going into the school district compared to ours. And
I looked at that before I came here.
we're rated where are we rated in the state. I mean, we were at 300 and
We're in the bottom 10%.
bottom 10% in the state. And so, and even with the levy, that doesn't even bring us in the middle of where we're rated in terms of districts within the entire state. We do have a lot of information on our website if you have time to check that out. with a lot of factual information for you.
I add a little more.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa, thank you for your questions.
Yeah, do you? Okay.
I think it's really important to
Yeah.
reiterate the fact that we put this into the voters' hands rather than taking control of it as a board and saying, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna re-up on that existing levy. And as we know, it was very close. Obviously, there were some dissenting views, but it was interesting, the conversations that we had with the public were related to, we know that the state is underfunding education. And I think as a taxpayer, if I want to talk to somebody about why are we paying so much for education, I would be talking to the state of Minnesota. And we threw this back out to the voters as a chance to say, hey, let's preserve a system for our children that we feel like will keep people in Monticello at as affordable of a rate as possible. And I think it's important to note too that it wasn't an exact double. The $750 to the $1,550 was a little bit more than double. And that was to support budgets that were all the way out past 2030. So we knew we could survive more than the blink of an eye into the future. Had we re-upped the existing levy, in 2 or 3 years, we'd be right back here saying we're underwater. So that was the point, was to get us out 5 or 6 years.
Well, it wouldn't be a truth in taxation if I didn't show up. So, glad to be here tonight. I'll be handing out sheets here. I did go through some other stuff, and I'll call it statute land stuff because it really is. It's on the statutory end. With trying to understand the ballot itself, because obviously you guys know that the ballot itself did not clarify absolutely what was to be had with the referendum. It can be extended to 20 years. Nobody's argued that here. The fact that it wasn't written on the ballot itself is obviously deceitful to the voters, right? It can't get away from that. I know you guys aren't arguing about that. But with that, I was looking at the other aspects of the questions that were, how it was related to that question. And I could go into this. I did a lot about it, and there is really nothing in state statute, again, statute land, which is not where I normally want to be, but I'll do it for tonight, is to actually ask, the revoke and replace that you guys did is not actually stated in statute. They have every other combinations, but revoke and replace is not in there, which is kind of concerning because obviously you guys are getting your language from that statute in order for you guys to do a referendum. So I would ask where that authority was done from the state in terms of how you got that, because it does not show up anywhere. And I've got the whole example for you guys to show. I've got the whole statute here, and it does not show you how you can revoke and replace. So I'm not sure how the Secretary of State was able to come up with that particular ballot, but nevertheless, we went ahead with it, and November 4th showed what it was, but it wasn't by much, right? 3%, 362 votes. It's not a lot. So you've got a lot of people on both sides of this whole argument because there's a lot of things that people are having to be challenged with the property tax. Having said that, I did have a question for you, Tina, in terms of what was reflected, and this is for the people to understand on their tax statement. Was that as if the amount that they were showing as the voter-approved levy that you guys submitted to the county by September 30th, was that the amount as if the 2015 referendum went for that additional year? Yes. So that's what it was. Okay. So that cleared that up a little bit. I was talking to Kyle and trying to figure that out because the only thing that you guys know for sure is that the referendum was going to be revoked, but that has to go with if it failed, right? So that question on the ballot, again, it would have been nice if it would have been a little bit more easier to understand between the revocation of the all levies coming in or just this one so that you can do a replacement. But getting to the next level, this is the question that you guys are going to have to answer at some point here, at least more than you, but most of the public servants, is yearly property tax, private land constitutional, right? That's a big one. And that's, again, I want to remind you guys, when you took the oath being on the school board, you swore an oath to the constitutions, not the statutes, the constitutions. And there's a reason for that. You guys unfortunately should be able to know, fortunately should know, but unfortunately do not know what the Constitution is verbatim. So we gave you a copy of the most important section of it, which is the Article 1, which has all 17 sections of the Bill of Rights, which is on the Minnesota Constitution side. In that, Article 1, Section 15 talks about allodial. The other pamphlet will go into describing it, but what allodial means is basically you're the sole ownership of that property. And with that, your property is yours, and that to have what's called a feudal tenure, you'd have lordship over that. That lordship does not exist, cannot exist in the state of Minnesota per the Constitution. And what's happening is what you've seen in other states, but particularly this one, we define that as somebody that's having to have a rent. And that's what property taxes are doing for the people. And that's what's not right, and that's what's wrong. So this is just a general education piece of it, but hopefully there'll be more to come on that. Like I said, it is going to hit a lot of people, and I get it. You know, you guys may not feel the benefits of this. I would say the benefits, but you guys aren't going to feel much of a change for your budget, but there are definitely a lot of people that will be. And this is one that will take, you know, quite a few families to say, is it worth it? And so I'm here just to educate you on the next level, which is the constitutional aspect of it. And it is more important than our statutory aspect, because everything that is comes from the legislation has to be in pursuance of the Constitution. Constitution is the highest supreme law of the land. So I'm hoping you guys are able to read that and actually take it in full consideration, not just a thing to shove into the shredder, because it's very important that you guys understand why this is going to be challenged now. So, but I thank you for your time. Thank you for answering my question, Tina. And yeah, there we go. And thanks for not doing the timer. Yeah, that unfortunately that I know you guys did that last year and Kathy was here, but that should not be done. It's not per state statute. This was meant to be an open interchange. And as you can tell, thank you, Mark, for asking questions, because that takes up any time, and that's not what, you know, you could filibuster the person, and that's not what the truth and taxation allows for. It is full interaction between those elected officials and the people. So, thank you.
You did, thank you.
All right, no action tonight. I'll come back on December 15th for the final levy approval. If there's any questions or anything more you want me to highlight, just let me know.
Thank you, we appreciate it. All right, now we'll move on to item number C. We get to hear, this is the best part of the evening, we get to hear from our student representatives report. So help me welcome to the podium Dawson, Blek, and Natasha Forstie to give us an update.
Oh, good evening. Dawson and I are here to just briefly cover, we have two topics that we're going to talk on. So I'm going to start by just giving a brief update of the transition that we just had today from trimester 1 into our trimester 2. So as I'm sure you guys know, our school calendar, we had the end of trimester 1 just came last November, and then we had a week off, and as of today, we are now settling into trimester 2. That means a lot of different things for different students, whether that means a whole new schedule, just a couple new classes, but regardless, it means new teachers, new classmates, a new schedule for every student in some aspect. We also have, in trimester 2, we have, as we're getting into winter, as I'm sure you guys all know, now that means our winter sports are in full swing. We also, this week, we have a couple of activities that are going on at our high school. We have on Wednesday, December 3rd, we have our blood drive. And then this weekend, we have Shrek the Musical being put on at the high school on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So those are coming up. And then we also did have one sort of event that went on in trimester 1, which was our Veterans Day program, which Dawson is going to cover.
Yes, on November 11th, we got to have our Veterans Day program hosted here at the high school. We had our wonderful speaker, Miss Jamie Sieben, along with we had our VFW serve as the color guard, and then we had both performances from our Monticello High School choir and our band. Natasha and I were very thankful for the opportunity to MC that program, And genuinely, we want to say thank you to the administration for keeping that something that happens annually every year. Natasha and I are thankful for that opportunity to be a part of something that we are actually passionate about. And it does mean a lot. Like, that's something that my stepmother remembers. And it's something that I'm proud of that we have here at our school. And I thank our administration for keeping that going for years, even though there will be students that sit through it and wish it wasn't there. We had a very good attendance that day, but I really do think it means a lot more, not just to the veterans, but also us that have family that have served, or us that really do love our nation. That means a lot to us to have that opportunity. So thank you. Any questions?
Or do we have any questions? Well, welcome back, right, from break. Fun way to get started, and yeah, it was an honor to speak. So all of our students were so respectful at the middle school and the high school, and the program brought tears to eyes. It was so awesome. So you two did a fantastic job of emceeing, so good job.
Well, thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to safe and healthy culture. Item number 7. I'll bring back up to the podium Director of Business Services Tina Burkholder to go over enrollment projections.
Whoopsies. All right. All right, so normally I do this presentation in November, but with the audit being moved up in November, just made this flop to have more Tina time in December and have enrollment projections for tonight. With this enrollment projection, we'll go over some different data points to look at and review this year's enrollment projection and go over next year's enrollment projection. This is just a sneak peek at the enrollment projection where we'll end up at the end of this presentation. So for 26-27, looking at 3,898 as our enrollment projection number. Over the last 10 years, we've seen some small increases and decreases with our enrollment. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a decrease of 158 students, or a 3.85%. So again, you can see some increases and decreases over the last 5 years. Our resident population, the students that live within our district boundaries, have similar trends in what's happening. Again, some small increases and decreases during the different years. In resident population, it does not include homeschool students, and hopefully next year I can have a graph that shows 10 years of history of homeschool enrollment that's in our boundaries. The next slide has the percent of residents being served in our district, so you can see a decline where we're just above 80% of our residents being at Monticello schools. I also like to look at open enrollment trends within the district. So this is looking at last year's data that the state has for school districts. So we have the biggest gains from Big Lake, where we net 164 students last year from Big Lake, and we lose the most to St. Michael Albertville, where we lost a net of 160 kids. Looking at this information in comparison to the 23-24 school year, we gained less from Big Lake last year, or 23-24. We had a net gain of almost 200 students. St. Cloud, we gained more. Last year was a plus 72 versus a plus 85. Becker, we gained a little less. Last year, or 23-24, was plus 29 versus a plus 23. We gained more from Maple Lake. 23-24, we were a net minus 6, and last year we were plus 5. And we're losing more to Worthington. I'm guessing there's an online school where we're seeing more enrollment loss to that district. Swan River, we lost a little more, a net minus 84 versus a minus 71. The co-op, we're gaining some ground. A lot of that has to do with shifting some programs back to Monticello, so there are students. And then I think we lost a little less with the Minnesota transition. So on the side is kind of the charter schools or Right Tech, the co-op sort of enrollment. And then just looking at 10 years of how we are doing for open enrollment, and we are a net loser. Our biggest, I guess, gain or not as big loss was 2018, where we netted a minus 143, and last year our overall enrollment loss was a minus 256. There are a lot of options for students, whether it be online, homeschool. There's just a lot of options that families can choose to do. When we look at our fall versus spring enrollment, we tend to lose students throughout the year. So last year, we lost in all grade grouping categories, but we tend to lose the most at the high school level. We lost at minus 55 during the year at the high school. And then looking at 10 years, we did have a couple positive years where we gained students throughout the year in 2016-17, and actually a COVID year of 2021 where we saw a gain. Another piece of information to look at are the single-family detached building permits. So last year, 2024, there were 48 building permits, and 25 year to date, we're at 35. There's more housing kind of going up on that Walmart end of town, so hopefully we'll continue to see some building activity to help our enrollment. Also like to look at the Wright County population. So again, it's not necessarily the city of Monticello, but Wright County as a whole has been slowly increasing as well throughout the last few years. And then we'll take a look at our enrollment projection for this year. Overall, we were overestimated the students by 54 students. So we didn't see as many come in for kindergarten, minus 20 in grades 1 through 5, and just a handful at the middle school and high school. The next chart just has it broken down by grade, the projection versus what actually happened. But not too many swings besides the kindergarten. And that's, you know, you never know where kids are going to show up once they hit kindergarten, if they're going to come here or if they're going to go elsewhere. So when we look at open enrollment or enrollment projection data with the Ehlers model, you can look at your October 1st MARS information. You can look at end of year information or district data. With October 1 MARS information, that's just looking at Monticello students, and because we're a co-op host, we do have some students at Pinewood and the middle school and high school that kind of flow between Monticello programs and co-op programs. So it's best to use district data when you're looking at those two options. End of year data, as you saw, we tend to lose students throughout the year, so it's best not to use that information because we want to staff when we're at our fullest, and that tends to be at the start of the school year. And once you kind of know what data you want to use, you look at kindergarten projection methods. You can hold it constant for the different variables. You can look at a 4 or 6 year linear progression. You can look at average county births or, again, district data. I like to look at county births. This is a history of the births in Wright County in comparison to the kindergarten enrollment that shows up 5 years later. But you can see the last 4 years, the Wright County births have been increasing, so that's a positive sign for enrollment. But overall, we've been losing ground on Wright County births and who's actually showing up at our schools. So using a Wright County birth method, you can use a low, medium, high county birth projection, and I tend to use the middle average county birth rate, just looking at how we look in comparison to the kids showing up in kindergarten 5 years later. And then within the projection model, there's a 2 to 7 year average or a 2 to 7 weighted year average. And the next slide has 4 different projections to look at. I chose the 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, and 6 year. The 5 year is the most aggressive, where it has our peak year of where our enrollment was the highest. So based on that information, I use that method, knowing our births are going up, we're still seeing building activity, that might be a good solution to use. This enrollment projection includes our online, but it does not include our co-op, our students in our co-op setting for classrooms at the workforce or Foundations 1 at the middle school. So again, this is our enrollment projection where it shows that 3,898 for next year and kind of where we're heading the next 5 years. And you can see there is still a decline, and the next chart shows a big reason why. The red bar are the kindergarten history and projection of the kindergarten classes coming in, and the gray bars are the senior classes exiting our buildings. So we have large senior classes exiting our buildings and not as many kindergartners replacing that class size. So we will see a decline until those start lining up or the kindergarten is exceeding the senior class sizes. Another reason why we look at enrollment projections, because we want to make sure we have enough building capacity. And since we are on a decline with enrollment, we do have enough building capacity to hold our enrollment in the next 5 years. This is, again, looking at the kindergarten projection where you can see that dip and hopefully an increase, as I mentioned, with the county bursts increasing on an upward path. Grades 1 through 5, it's kind of dipping a little bit and increasing based on the, again, the bursts and the higher kindergarten classes starting to come through. Grades 6 through 8 have a little bit of an increase yet with some somewhat larger class sizes coming through, but then still dropping off with those lower kindergarten classes coming in, and the high school kind of just leveling off, but declining as well as those bigger classes are coming through. This has the enrollment projection by grade. Next, after this, I'll work on how does that look between our elementary buildings, because we have Pinewood, Little Mountain, and Nature Base to kind of divvy out how that looks for those buildings. This chart is interesting because it shows where the enrollment changes swings are. So you can see kindergarten, there's a big change of plus 21 hopefully coming through. And elementary, there are some decreases coming through. So we might see some staffing shifts there. Middle school, we'll see some larger changes hopefully with the middle school and like the Swan River kids coming through there. High school, some decreases there where we might see some staffing shifts between those two buildings. Oh, I see that number wasn't updated. It's supposed to be 3,898 is our projection for next year. Oh, and that was my last slide. Any questions on enrollment projections?
Well, I can start with a question. So I know we do a questionnaire for students that leave. Do we do a questionnaire on the students that we gain on why they're coming to Monticello?
I believe we do.
Interesting to know, if it's some of the work that we've done with our offerings to students. Any other questions from the board? No? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, now we'll move on to item B, employee handbook amendments. I'd like to welcome to the podium Director of Human Resources, Rob Daniker.
Good evening, Chair Sieben, members of the board, Superintendent Olson. So the first item I'm up here for tonight is 2 proposed employee handbook amendments. Now, typically, we do not recommend or bring forward amendments to the employee handbook mid-year. However, in this case, we have the Minnesota Paid Family Leave Act coming on line as of January 1st. Minnesota School Board Association is recommending that as a part of that process, we formalize district procedures within the employee handbook, and so that's why we're bringing that language forward tonight. Since we already knew we were going to have that on the agenda this evening, also bringing forward a minor adjustment regarding the section on absences in the employee handbook as well. And basically what we're doing there is clarifying that anytime an employee is expecting to be gone more than 2 consecutive days, that they do 2 things. One is they notify their supervisor, and then also secondly, if there's a conversation we had with the Department of Human Resources regarding any formal leave applications or leave information, that they consider doing that as well. And so both of these would be action items for this evening, but I'm open to any questions before that.
Any questions from the board? This is an action item.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Casey Root, seconded by Melissa Curtis. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion passes 4-0, and we will move right along to first read of policy.
Right. The monthly disclaimer, so the policy committee meets once per month before the first board meeting of each month, and the committee goes through the policies for review and revision for the coming meeting. This is the first reading of those, and so we have, you're pretty quick on the trigger, Gavin, you're on it. Okay, we have 6 coming forward for first read this evening. The first of those 6 is 606.5, Procedure for Selection, Use, and Reconsideration of Textbook, Instructional Material, Media, and Supplementary Material. The purpose of this policy is to provide direction and to delegate responsibility for selection and reconsideration of academic materials. This is a relatively new policy across the state and in Monticello. Ours is a little bit unique in terms of what other districts in the state have, and that's because our policy 606.5 was used as one of the models that the Minnesota School Board Association developed their statewide model on. And so this policy, again, just lays out how curriculum items are selected, and then also if there's cause to reconsider those materials, how that would be reviewed. Any questions on 606.5? All right. Second policy for this evening is policy 611, homeschooling. The purpose of this policy is to recognize and provide guidelines in accordance with state law for parents who wish to have their children receive education in a homeschool that is an alternative to an accredited public or private school. As Director Burkholder was saying, we do have a sizable homeschooling population within our school district boundaries, and so this is applicable. In reference to this policy itself, this policy is coming forward as part of our review cycle for policies. There's no substantive changes to the policy as it currently exists. Any questions, however, on 611? Third policy for this evening is 901, community education. The purpose of this policy is to convey to employees and to the general public the important role of community education within the school district. There were some minor changes in this policy, and that's part of our review cycle. This policy has not been reviewed by the policy committee for some time, and so there's some minor changes that have taken place over time through legislative action and also recommendation of the Minnesota School Boards Association. Any questions on 901?
I show we have policy 612.1 on the agenda. Are we reviewing that?
Thank you for catching that. Did we go past one, Gavin? Board Member Branson for catching that. 612.1, this is development of parent and family engagement policies for Title I programs. The purpose of this policy is to encourage and facilitate involvement by parents of students participating in Title I in the educational programs and experience of students. Title programs are federally funded programs. Those dollars are directed towards the district. There's 4 different title allocations, Title I, II, III, and IV, that we receive dollars for. And this policy lays out, again, how to use those programs to build student and family engagement in the school district and our programs. Any questions on 612.1? Okay. You can go to the next one, Gavin. We did 901. Thank you. Fifth on our list tonight is 902. This is the use of school district facilities and equipment. The purpose of this policy is to provide guidelines for the community use of school facilities and equipment. Essentially, it's parameters that the community education and our activities department use in terms of, again, public access to facilities and equipment therein. Any questions on 902? Okay. And our final one in this evening is 903, visitors to school district buildings and sites. The purpose of this policy is to inform the school community and the general public of the position of the school board on visitors to school buildings and other school property. Pretty straightforward policy. We did articulate a little bit in more detail a procedure regarding visitors and their obligation to report to the specific site office when they arrive. And then also we added some material in here regarding how visitors that are law enforcement or other government entities shall be received in accordance with state law and district procedures as well. Any questions on 903? Okay. And then just generally, I did not articulate this at the top, but all 6 of these policies are coming to the board this evening and at our next meeting as a product of our review cycle. This year, we're reviewing policies in the 300s, 600s, and 900s. And as of this meeting, we've exhausted all of the 300s, all but one of the 600s, and now we're into the 900s. And so a little progress check. We're ahead of schedule, and that's a great thing for our committee. And again, for meetings like this, possibly bring lesser policies forward the remainder of the school year.
Awesome. Thank you, Director Daniker. Appreciate it. As always, though, I know we don't have a ton of questions when we're up here, and that's because of the hours of work that goes behind the scenes into all of these policies before the first reading happens, as well as any amendments to the handbooks that we had robust conversation on. So thank you to the board members for work on that. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. We are adjourning this meeting today, December 1st at 7:02 p.m. Our next meeting will be December 15th at 6 p.m. And we will have an organizational and regular meeting January 5th at 5 p.m. Have a great evening.